FYI. Okay, welcome back to another AU Core Technical Design Group meeting. My name is Landon Riley, for those I have not met. I'm from Best Practice Software and AU Core Co-Chair. Today we're going to go through some ballot resolution. This is shaping up to be the second last ballot resolution meeting, and we'll do a walkthrough of FMM2, time permitted. I'll start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the custodians of the traditional lands on which we all gather today, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators, and healers. Our agenda for today will start with a focus on ballot resolution and time permitting FMM2, fire maturity model, 2 discussions. There's going to be some usual business that we always go through around minutes, and then we'll look at going into ballot reconciliation. So what we'll also go through today are the results of the block votes 5 and block vote 6. There was one refer to telecom from block vote 6. We're going to continue discussions from the last technical design group around variance statement and around the description of search parameter purpose. We're also going to have a discussion around recorded sex or gender, which was discussed at the working group earlier this week. And we're going to have a revisit on the medication requests do not perform, which we're going to talk through, and time permitted AFFM level 2 discussions. Dushi, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I was wondering if we can start with discussing 2 tracker items first and then do the usual business after that, because we only have Ruben for the first half an hour of the meeting.
That sounds, yes, absolutely.
And there are 2 items that we need Ruben to be. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
perfect.
Lucy.
I think he's only here for a half hour as well, so we'll try to kick over to those items straight away. All right.
I've discussed my topics with Dushi, so I think she can take that without me.
Okay. All right, cool. We'll kick off with the variance statement discussion. I can give a bit of an overview and then hand over to possibly Ruben or Brett for further clarification. From what I can, sorry.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Go ahead, Landon.
All right, cool. You can correct me if I get anything wrong. From what I can see, most people here from the previous discussion, this is about the AU core variance statement, or I'm sorry, around the AU variance statement. There were some actions from the board and the FIRE working group to change the variance statement requirements. The focus is on whether this implementation guide has any variances from AU core and AU based profiles. I think it's important to note that these changes are informative, not normative, so mostly editorial changes. This was brought to the FIRE working group, I think a few weeks ago, and the outcomes here are noted of what they motioned and voted on. And the decisions from AU base will flow into AU core. I think the discussion may also float around the preamble text, so I'm happy to load up that in a second if we wanted to look at that and talk to it. But what I might do now is, based on these decisions for the FIRE working group, I might hand over to possibly Brett or Ruben for further discussions on what we might do with this ticket moving forward, potentially.
Yeah, happy to speak to that. We had some good discussions about this in the HL7 Australia board, and I think we landed on a sensible and reasonable outcome. In essence, we made some tweaks to the requirements, and in particular, we clarified who exactly this applies to, and we clarified that it applies to any fire implementation guide produced by the HL7 Australia Fire Work Group or its subcommittees or technical design groups. And we also agreed that it should be versioned and that anything referencing it, like AU Core, needs to specifically reference a particular version, and probably the one that was in force at that time. And I think that was sort of what we committed to do at either a FIRE work group or AU Core meeting. So I think all that remains to be done now is just to decide how we want to add a resolution for this particular tracker item for AU Core, which aligns with those decisions. And Brett, happy to hand to you to add anything to that.
Oh no, I think that basically covers it. So that document has actually been prepared now, and there is a version 1 variance document as per these things. So I think it's just finalising, I guess, the wording and what presents in AU Core for today. Yeah.
Okay, so given that, do these changes just naturally flow over from the FIRE working group? Like, is there any action that we need to take on it, or will this naturally just flow in that we'll be required to update this version number, for example?
I'm not sure what we decided to do for AU base. I'm not sure whether AU base itself has a variance statement, because it obviously doesn't vary from itself. But I would suggest, Landon, that we probably just need to decide what text we want to retain on this page. Obviously, this page is going to remain. So at best, this is persuasive with mod or not persuasive with mod. But I think the key things are that we definitely want to keep everything from 361 probably as is. And in the preamble, we probably want to make an assertion that this variance statement is provided in compliance with the requirements and the version of those requirements.
So you're happy, because I think you're right. I think 361 is actually the official.
Yeah, that's
content.
really that's the compliance part. It's stating what variances, if any, and additionally profiled resources. So it's really just the preamble. And I think probably one of the questions we need to answer here is whether we want to repeat the content from the requirements document, which now exists as version 1, or whether we simply want to say this variance statement is in compliance with this version of the requirements and make that a link. So I'm pretty easy on how we do that. I'm generally not a fan of repeating things, but there is convenience in that, so I can see both sides.
Sushi, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Ruben. I think that keeping preamble text is useful because we've had a number of comments to say that it's useful, and without preamble text, the rest of the page might not make sense to everyone. So I think if we just point to the specific version of the variance requirements document, and we change the wording of the AU Realm FIRE implementation guide to conform to recommendations from the FIRE work group, and keep the preamble text basically.
So Landon, maybe we should have a look at that version 1 requirements page. And I think it's on Confluence somewhere.
Yeah. Well, if you follow the link in the document, it'll take you to that page.
Oh, yep.
So that HTML page that you're at, if you follow that link, it takes you there. And so, and then you open the document, and following this will then show you what somebody will see if they don't have, if the text is not repeated. And they've got 9 pages, only a little bit, which is particularly relevant.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
I guess
not only a little bit is particularly relevant, only a little bit of it is of immediate interest to someone who's reading this, as opposed to making sure that everything is fine and as it should be.
Michael, you have a question.
Back on the slide you had, I think it had a potential resolution there. So it's replaced the words "and requirements"
Oh yes, from the
And
working group, correct. So this was
yeah,
the suggested words, which it says, I think it says change from realm to this.
Yep. So I think that would be part of the proposal, and
Yes.
and the variant statement must reference specific version. So potentially they're just the two changes we're making, is making the changes to that HL7 Australian published, and the update the reference. Is that potentially the only changes we're looking at?
Yeah, so Dushi and I looked at this before as well. So like, yeah, the word, we do have the words AU realm in the preamble. So this was actually a fix for the actual variance requirements content, which has been fixed.
Yep.
So, but I obviously want to align with this recommendation in the preamble. So I guess we have AU realm appearing in the preamble. We can replace those words. And I think the link to the document, I was just considering, it might be better if we actually had the version 1 document hosted in the FireIG publishing directly, and then that way it will always be the right document, because that Confluence page is obviously in Confluence and can possibly move around or be relocated. So I think it would be fair to actually publish the document in our FireIG publishing and just reference it directly, and then that way you'll always have it available, because it is a specific version. Yeah,
Sounds like a good approach.
Yeah, that all sounds great. Well, based
so can I roll that up into a proposal?
Yeah, yes.
I propose we change the words AU realm to HL7 Australia published fire implementation guides under the governance of the HL7 Australia Fire Workgroup in the places it appears in the preamble, and also make sure the link to the variance document is the correct version 1, and also the hyperlink text of the link to the document reflects the specific version.
Ruben.
Yeah, just friendly amendment. I think the key thing for me is if we could, as the first statement of the preamble be that this version be something of the lines of this version of the AU Core FireIG complies with version 1.0 of the HL7 Australia Fire Workgroup AU variance requirements, just to make that really clear up front. Yeah. And everything else, as Brett said.
I will happily agree to that.
Thanks, Brett.
Okay. With that amendment and the motion, is anyone happy then to second that?
I'll second it, Ruben.
Awesome. Brett, do you have the capabilities to put forth a vote? I don't think I
do. Hang on. Launch a vote for current motion. Here we go. There you go.
Awesome. If everyone can please put in their votes.
They're rolling in.
Give it a few more moments. We're at 70% of participants. Okay. Give it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It looks like it's stabilized. So I'll end a poll now.
Cool.
So we have affirmative, actually, how does that read? Affirmative 22, negative 0, and 7 abstain.
Actually, I'm a +1 for affirmative because I can't vote.
23 affirmative.
Thanks.
Oh, and show results. Awesome. That motion has passed. Thank you, everybody. What we might do now is move to the next one. I think Ruben would like to go through, which I believe is this one here. Is that correct, Ruben?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So for this ticket, I believe the same ticket was raised in AU Base and AU Core. The summary of the ticket was for patient gender to be considered as an RSG value and not to be used for gender identity and clinical sex parameter. There was a vote on Wednesday that the working group put forth to create a bullet point in AU-based patient usage notes, which added this text. So that went through last week.
Yep.
I guess the question is what to do with this ticket.
So it's really quite helpful that this was actually resolved in AU base, because AU core patient inherits everything from AU base patient. So accordingly, by solving it in AU base, we have solved it for AU core, and accordingly, we can resolve this as no longer required because it's already done.
Agreed. That sounds like a good resolution.
So I think there's a quick way to do this, and that is for me to simply withdraw this ticket or ballot comment, or we can simply resolve it as no change required. Maybe no change required is the better approach, so that it's still logged as something that changed from the ballot version to this version.
I'm not sure there's an option, no change required. There's a non-persuasive. Actually, what do you recommend, Brett?
Duplicate?
Duplicate? Yeah,
duplicate needs to apply to the same specification.
Yeah, it does. I guess it's non-persuasive. It's handled elsewhere at that point.
Are those the only options?
Well, actually, it's persuasive with mod because we are.
Yeah, that's it. I'd go with persuasive with mod.
Yeah.
If you withdraw it, then we don't have to have a resolution.
I'd still like the fact that this was a comment included in the release notes for the changes from the ballot version.
Fair enough.
For that reason, I'd like to resolve it as persuasive with mod.
So what is the mod part of it?
The mod part is that no change is required to AU core because the change is handled in one of AU core's dependencies.
So persuasive with mod doesn't have to apply to the same specification. It can apply to different specification.
It can.
Okay.
It can.
Yeah.
So I move that this is resolved as persuasive with mod, as the issue has been resolved in the linked tracker item in AU base, which is a dependency for AU core.
I will second that.
Great. Thank you very much, Brett. Is it okay, Brett, if you put forth a vote?
Okay. All right, should be up.
Great, thank you. Okay, the votes are trickling in.
Any comments about the comment?
I'm happy to respond to the comment if we're done voting.
Okay, we'll give it a countdown. I think it seems to have settled. So we'll give it a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we'll end the poll. Great. Actually, Brett, do you have a...
I'm a +1 on affirmative for this one.
You're affirmative +1. Given that, we have 21 affirmative, we have 1 negative, and we have 6 abstain. That motion has passed.
All right, Landon, if I may have leave to respond to David's question. I'm happy to do so. So we are absolutely discerning between sex and gender. The issue is that Patient.gender does not discern in general. So in AU Base and AU Core, we have dedicated elements for gender identity, which is based on the gender harmony work and work we've done in AU Core and AU Base. But what this change is trying to make very clear is that you cannot rely on Patient.gender as a consumer's gender identity or their sex for clinical use. It's not reliable. That's what this change achieves.
Right here, yeah. I guess I'm processing what that means, because I guess gender identity then becomes a little. I should look at that a bit closer.
Yeah, happy to talk to you offline, David, if you like.
I think the more specific thing is that effectively patient gender is a recorded sex of or gender
Exactly.
within the context of this system that is sending out this. I think that's how I interpret this anyway.
Yeah, you're spot on, Heath. That's exactly the way I interpret it as well. Or put another way, it's not reliable as gender identity, nor sex for clinical use.
Sure, but I guess when you look at the list of values, right, it's pretty limited.
It is, and it's a required binding as well, which means you can't add additional values.
I feel the language is a little strong to say and not used for gender identity or clinical sex parameter. I mean, I guess
it can be used for those things, but just not reliably.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that statement.
Yeah.
I guess it's true to say it can't be used you can't just copy it into one of those other two.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the concern which this deals with.
The key thing there is that it's a sex or gender. We can't
know.
Distinguish between them.
Well, what concerns me,
element and the other element do.
What concerns me is the scale of use of it still. Like it's 100% scale.
So I guess the response to that, Angus, is that this is something that, you know, if there's current use in the system in other specifications and solutions, that's fine. We are drawing the line in the next version of AU Base and AU Core to say, if you're adopting AU Core and AU Base, then you need to be aware that that's how this field is going to be interpreted.
Yeah.
And make whatever changes are necessary.
Yeah, even though it's probably closer to sex than it is to gender. And I guess that's what throws.
No, yeah.
You don't know.
We're trying to add certainty, and that's what this achieves.
Well, I guess calling it Patient.gender to me is saying that it's trying to play in the gender space, but really we're talking about sex.
There's a whole chapter on what it actually means in the FireCore spec, and unfortunately, it comes down to adopters to define what it means wherever it appears. So it's not even clear cut, really.
And the point is, you can't. You don't know whether it is sex or gender. That's the point.
That's the point.
And that's why we now have these other ones where we can say that is their sex, that is their gender.
Exactly.
This recorded sex.
Yep.
I guess that sort of looks like, weren't we talking about whether you were pregnant or not before in a previous meeting to decide that your status, you're either not pregnant or I don't know. Or I am pregnant or I don't know. And so this is almost sounding the same way. But anyway, I can live with that. No, thanks very much for explaining that.
Sure. Thanks, Landon. Back to you.
Great. Thanks for the discussion. Heath, do you want me to go through your item next if you need to drop off early? Happy to do that.
I'm literally going to drop off in about 5 minutes. So I'm more than happy for you to start the conversation, but I'm probably not going to be here. At the
voiceover. So voiceover speaks to.
Don't know what voiceover is. There we go. All right, cool. We can kick off the comments. Awesome. We can kick off the. Oh, Dushi, you have a question?
Yes, and I just thought of that. I think it's fine, but I just wanted to confirm from the procedural point of view, can we discuss and resolve items that have been referred to telecom in the absence of person who actually referred to telecom? I think it's fine, but just want to confirm that.
Would that be a question for Brett?
Maybe.
Well, I think the idea is that they have an opportunity to come and
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I read guidelines, and the guidelines are not strict. They just say that it would be desirable that the person that referred to telecom is present, but not required.
I've had the opportunity.
And we just took your last few minutes.
Yep.
I'll kick off the conversation with this one anyway, just because Heath might be able to provide in the next 3 minutes some input. So this was requested to be removed from AU Core Block Vote 4. Prior to removal, it was 10 affirmative, 1 negative. Heath had a comment. It was not clear what the resolution was. It doesn't address the original concern of the voter. There's a little bit of, I think there was some suggestions by Heath in the actual ticket itself. And Dushi made an amendment. I think Heath came back yesterday. So I've kind of compiled those into this description here based on the conversations we've had earlier this week. This pretty much encapsulates the original disposition with the red indicating the updated changes from the original disposition of persuasive. Are you happy with what this looks like, Heath, while you're still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, awesome. And I'll just show what the original ticket was. Open this up. And the original was to please add an explanation on the purpose of each additional search parameter and why they've been added. And this was the original resolution description. And this is the amendment that Heath is happy with. This large again.
Do that, Heath? Can you constrain a base search parameter?
That's exactly what this is doing. That's where I think, I'm not sure if Andy's on the call. And I think it was confused. Well, sorry, I think Andy was confused, and I certainly was when I came and reviewed this particular item. It's why I said we need to talk about this. So you can use search parameters to define your own, but like any kind of profile, like structure definition, you can also derive from another search parameter and add further constraints. So the base specification and AU base actually define search parameters. And then in AU Core, we don't define new ones, hence we don't introduce new search parameters. We only constrain those further that have been defined in AU base or via Core by putting extra constraints on them to actually say you must things like multiple and, multiple or, comparators, chaining, and modifiers. What the two search parameters do currently in AU Core is specify chaining. So there's some examples there that basically are saying here is a search parameter where we expect, I'm not sure if it's a should or a shall, but basically so that's exactly what's going on here. We're actually deriving from a base search parameter, putting an extra constraint on it for defining chaining in AU Core. The STU note below is basically saying exactly that, but then saying in future releases of AU Core, we're going to go further and we're going to basically have a search parameter derived from its base for every search parameter.
How's that going to work interoperable? So Cerner, who comes from America, expect this search parameter to do this, and they come to Australia and it just magically does something else.
It does the same thing. It's just that you've got additional conformance requirements on you. So you should or shall support a chained identifier on a patient reference, for example. On, say, an allergy, you would have a search parameter of patient with patient.identifier.
So it doesn't constrain, it extends?
It's saying that from a conformance perspective, doesn't change the behavior, just says now you shall do this. So you have to,
so it's
or
gone
you
from to
should.
shall in
Yeah.
core.
So think about it from a capability statement perspective, with the way that we have on search parameters, where we just say you should or shall support the search parameter of patient. But we're going one step further now and saying, okay, if you shall support patient as the search parameter, but you also shall support patient identifier as the chained parameter as well. So it's not just the patient preference, it's also the chained patient identifier. So it gives basically some of the rules that are all in narrative. We now have a computable way of representing them. So things like multiple and, we had a lot of discussion around multiple and, I think also in we actually, in a computable manner, can now say you shall support multiple and. And you shall support these comparators. So for things like dates, for example, and we've been talking about dates, you know, that you shall support a multiple and you shall support these comparators greater than, less than, all those sorts of things. We can now put them in the capability statement as computable state conformance requirements, not just narrative.
So can I ask the counter then why did we dismiss creating a new search parameter like core patient search parameter? You know, so it's actually a different name. It's now not patient, it's patient core or something.
No, because it is actually go back to what you said. We don't want to have to make others implement a new patient parameter. We're just constraining its the conformance associated with that existing one.
Do you have a question, Brett? Or a statement?
No, it was more of a comment, but I think he's covered most of it. Yeah, because I think there's some stuff in the FHIR kind of search definitions that you could do this and you could do that, and this also brings out specific things we want done. So yeah,
the key is making this computable in the capability statement.
Yeah, it makes it a reliable set of things you can assume do exist. Yeah.
As an example, Inferno will now read these and actually automatically generate test cases for these kinds of search parameters. So it's giving us a computable form. And my understanding also is the narrative that's currently being handcrafted will be automatically generated, can be automatically generated in the publishing process. So we don't have to rely on douchey writing text. Gotta go, guys. See ya.
Great, thank you, Heath. There's a question from Jaime.
Hello. My question is, so this ticket is for the last meeting discussion that we did for having an extra system with the search for identifier, or is this something else for just adding constraints to the search?
This is different. This is somewhat different, I think, because that motion went through and passed in that previous one. This is more editorial around information for the search parameters.
Yeah, because I think it's at the moment we haven't got all of the search parameters defined in the specification. So I think that's what these words are trying to explain. That we have some rules written down around searching, but it's only a couple of them are actually captured with search parameter artifacts. So I think the plan will be for AU Core R2 is to kind of flesh out these search parameter definitions. So turn them from the narrative content we have, which defines the search requirements, into a set of search parameter artifacts that are then explicit in terms of the specification.
Yep. Okay, all good. That was I was a bit confusion there. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, so we're trying to capture everything we can in using the formal artifacts. So those words will be represented by the FHIR search parameter content. Yeah.
It's not the search parameter that defines these things, but does it? Like when I look at a search parameter resource, it doesn't say multiple and, multiple or, competitor, modified chain. It's literally a FHIR path and a name for the search parameter.
There's conform. There is the option to add those in search parameter.
Maybe I'm looking at this. I'm not looking at this.
US Core does it. They use the conformance expectations extension to specify conformance for each of these.
Yeah, there's a whole code system on that with value set. I think.
Yeah. So there's definitely like elements that cover things like multiple and, multiple or, and then you have an extension that lets you define the conformance level for the elements, right? So you can actually say which things must-may.
Okay, I can see it now. So I'm looking at the search parameter instance for patient, and it's just silent on those things.
Yeah,
and you're
exactly.
going to now add them in and make it more concrete.
Correct. Because the spec itself, if FHIR spec doesn't define those, right? So we're in fact getting much more explicit about things we're expecting to exist.
Yeah. If the base did define, I don't know, multiple and, if it said multiple and true, wouldn't be allowed to go multiple and false.
Correct. Yeah. So that would be like a national agreed search parameter implementation, and that would force everyone using AU base to. Well, we'd have to think about that in terms of picking up AU base profiles and things like that. In terms of what you're opting into, but it does kind of then give you a common definition. We haven't done that. We've got some extra search parameters in AU base, but not specific ones that are implementing current search parameters.
I'm good. It was hard, but I'll get
it's interesting, and like this is kind of where the conformance. Because this is really like leaning into conformance requirements and being able to express them in a computable way. So it's very helpful, I think, to kind of formalize that stuff as well. Yeah.
Richard, you have your hand raised.
I've just followed the links to the search parameter page in AU Core. So I've got common search parameters and then clinical patient. I presume this is what this is about. If you follow the clinical patient link, can you do that?
Yes.
So the issue, the related URL in the JIRA issue, and then you follow that AU Core request a capability statement link. And then you talk, and then here we got a description of it. Okay. Why have I got a AU Core? Oh, sorry. Can you go back to AU Core? Search parameter AU Core clinical patient.
Yeah. So, search parameter AU Core.
Yeah, because
actually, can you drop the link in the chat? If you've got it, just drop it in the chat and I'll load it up.
Okay, yeah. So this was the link I followed. Hang on. Sorry. Chat there. I followed that link out of the JIRA issue, which was the description of the search parameter patients, and that takes us to clinical patient. If you follow the clinical patient one, because I think this is what we're talking about here. Okay. In the second, a clinical patient should support patient identifier. This AU core search parameter extends the usage context of the clinical patient parameter. Now, I'm just wondering whether this is the thing which has perhaps led to some confusion as to whether this is extending or constraining a predefined one. And so what this is it's expanding the context, but it's not actually extending the parameter. Is this part of the confusion that's going on about what we're looking at here? And maybe the word extends should be a different word. Or am I jumping down a rabbit hole that's not where we are?
Sushi, do you have a response?
I think it's setting additional requirements, whatever that might be. So I think constraining is too strict to say.
Yeah, okay.
So-
It's just that extends makes me think that I've, if I extend a resource, in a sense, I'm adding extra options by using the extensions. While if I'm saying certain things can't be done, I'm constraining. So I think I think one of the earlier claims was this was constraining what we've earlier got, and in a sense, it perhaps expands. It expands the usage of context, and then you don't think, oh, this is an extension. This is actually a constraint.
Neither expand or constrain. It's clarifying, or it's more specifying. It's because
So maybe extend should be clarify.
Clarify, yeah, because currently
Well,
the base standard is vague. It does not set multiple or multi-land chain. Therefore, you're left going, does the service support or not? I have to actually look at their statement, right? And
I think you're extending the usage context is a little bit of a, I'm not sure what that means, but but you're definitely extending the conformance requirement, right? Because what you're doing is actually refining the conformance requirements. Because
you're adding more conformance requirements.
Yeah.
Which is different to say what effect does it have on a server? Does it now return more resources or less?
So if you're extending the list of requirements, so in a sense you're constraining, and you're constraining what was there before. And given that we often use extends to mean adding extra functions rather than to limit available functions, perhaps the word extends here is confusing. But I think I've dived down a different rabbit hole. I don't think this is quite what we were discussing.
Well, yeah, no, but I think this is part of what the ticket was kind of pointing to. I think we did it out at the search parameter listing page where we tried to change the words to put all that in context to say this is what these things are. So I think, yeah, but I think we should welcome a ticket from Richard to adjust the words in a way in the search parameters. And I think too, there'll be ample opportunity in R2 as well, just because there will be a whole set of new search parameters coming. So
okay. Yep.
it would be, if there is a way to express it,
issue. Yeah.
that's good for everyone. That's worth doing. But I think the ticket itself was kind of looking at a particular sentence to put. Yeah, because I think the main issue was why are there only 2 search parameters here when we've defined all these rules. And so I think that was confusing.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, that was a good discussion. Are we happy possibly to is someone happy to put forward a motion then to possibly accept this or any other motion?
Can we use a different word other than something else and constraints?
Clarifies or constraints feels like this search parameter is going to not do what it did before.
Yeah,
almost
it's
like
technically constraining the search parameters.
Yeah.
But that's not very helpful. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
previous-
you're focusing it, aren't you? You're focusing the service onto something, right? It's got its own content. It's got yeah. I like constraint personally, but
The focus is close. It's further specifying. It's clarifying. It's
tailoring almost. Yeah.
It is constraining, but constraining makes it hard to, because it's a search parameter.
Is refines a good word? Refines. Because that's a non-architectural word. I think the second sentence is better for sure, because it's explaining what we're doing.
I agree with David that constraints, or with others, that constraints is accurate, but on the other hand, you've got to stop and think about what it would mean here. So it winds up being a harder sentence to read. Clarifies?
Refines. I didn't hear someone say
refines. Clarifies.
New search parameters, but refines those from the base search parameter.
I like refines.
The second sentence brings it home, I think.
Or focuses, yeah.
Roma, you have your hand raised.
Is it maybe that the specific construction of the rest of the sentence makes that particular verb difficult? So it's, it does not introduce new parameters, but, if we don't try to replace that verb, but actually try to say explicitly what we're doing, right? So, provides like a minimum specification or ensures capability or something like that, but then restructure the rest of the sentence around that.
Is it a conformance? Is it we're trying to conform to something?
I think the word constraints is difficult because we're talking about search parameters. When we think of search parameters as something that it capture a set, and if you constrain it, you're getting less. And so the conflict of what a search parameter does is conflicting with the word constrain in a conformance sense. Like, yes, if this wasn't a search parameter, constraints would feel right. But because it's a search parameter, you feel like you're constraining your search.
Yeah, refines is better, I think, because in fact you're clarifying. Yeah, you're defining the behavior further than is already specified.
Further refining and clarifying what this search parameter does. You're not constraining the search, which is what it feels like by using the word constrain.
Yeah, you're not even constraining, because the original search parameter doesn't say you do or don't have to do these things. It's just silent, has So in fact, you're making it more explicit.
Well, and so what I struggle with is
you're constraining the parameter rather you're constraining the search function rather than constraining the search set.
Well, we're actually we're constraining the definition of the search. so not the actual
it's not as open.
search.
It's not as loose and open. At the moment, it's actually unclear what you would get in a search result based on the base standard. And we're probably all tripped up because we're used to using something like Happy, which implements everything. So you get it all, but Happy didn't have to. They could have actually implemented just the search parameter, but not chaining, not ands, not ors, and they still would have been conformant to the server.
Yeah.
Just they didn't do that. And we're saying in Spark, you must go to a certain bar, which Happy does, probably goes beyond. Yeah. But if I could go build a server, which was pretty trivial, that didn't support any of that, and I'd still be conformant to the international standard. It is. I just think the word constraints has to change to some other language because of the context of talking about search parameters.
Someone make a call.
So if I change this to refines.
I like refines.
Yeah, I like refines.
I like refines better. Yeah.
Okay. with that amendment, is someone happy to put forward a motion for this?
I'll motion.
Yeah, I'll second.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Is it okay if you put forth a poll, Brett?
I'm trying to.
Thank you.
Here we go. There we go.
Okay, votes are trickling in.
And I'll +1 too again then.
Sure, thank you. Okay, votes are slowing down. I'll give a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end the poll and I'll share the results. So we have 22 affirmative, we have 0 negative, and we have 5 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thank you very much, everyone. So what we might do now is we'll just skip back up to the top because we kind of took a little bit of a diversion just based on people's availability. And we'll try to move through this relatively quickly. And we'll jump back up because we think we still need to approve the minutes. We do have a few updates and news as well with AU CDI R2 updates of AU patient summary will be available for review in late November. And also the the AU patient summary FHIR IG call will be on the 15th of November. And that call will be similar to what the AU Core TDG calls are. And they'll be talking about ways of working, timelines, use cases, backlogs. And there's more information about how to sign up on this Confluence page here. And I can send a link to anyone who wants to be able more information around that or to sign up. With that, we emailed around the minutes last week. Does anyone need any more time to review the minutes? All right. I am not hearing that anyone needs any more time. So given that, and that we have slides and videos from the results of all the motions from the last TDG, is anyone happy or someone happy to motion for the approval of these minutes?
I'll motion, Doshi.
Thank you very much, Dushi. Is someone happy to second for the approval of these minutes?
I'm happy to second, Jamie.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Is it okay, Brett, if I ask again, please, to pop up a poll? And you can teach me how to do this next time, so I don't have to.
Absolutely. I know how to do it and I still have trouble. Here we go.
Awesome. I'll give it 5 more seconds or 10 more seconds. So it's still trickling in. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end the poll.
And I'm +1 again.
+1, thank you. So we have 16 affirmative. Oh, I'll share the results. 16 affirmative, 0 negative, and 7 abstain. Cool, thank you. Where are we? So just a reminder, Connectathon is in December. If you missed out on getting a ticket, you can email events@hl7.com.au to go on a waiting list. On that Connectathon, we're going to be going through some basic test scenarios for R1, where we'll test the ballot decisions we're recently making. And I'm also assuming we'll do some basic patient summary test scenarios for AU Core data as well. And a reminder, there is a scoping workshop, a half-day workshop in Melbourne on 12th of December to discuss AU CDI R2 and to develop the scope for AU Core R2. This is where we'll go through our backlog priorities for AU Core R2. And if you're interested to attend, please email the Spark team at spark@csiro.com.au. Express your interest to that. What we'll cover is, I think, what's coming in terms of patient summary requests in, and what we want to take from our backlog, including re-examining the things that we've considered for future use from previous ballots. 2 tickets per organisation, and I think the tickets are going quickly. So get in if you want to get in nice and early and email the Spark team. Cool. And this takes us to the ballot reconciliation. So as we stand today, triage is done, and we're making our way through the reconciliation, and we're about 68% of the way through that. And these changes are making their way into the IG with 33% applied. And these changes we're making will hopefully make their way into the December Connectathon, where we can test all of this. And if we go through the ballot issues, this is where we're currently at. So going from smallest to largest, there is just one invalid issue at this time, 4 being retracted for various reasons. For example, someone submitted a ballot item and has later made a decision to withdraw that ballot. 4 items are duplicates, the same issues as other ballot items. 9 are out of scope. Some of this is related to like fire standards or tooling, and 20 of those have been technical corrections. These are typically changes assessed by the co-chair triage, where there's a technical correction that we have to make, and we go forward and make that change. And we have 70 change requests, some of which have been raised to get on the backlog of R2. Some are editorial, typographical, navigation structure, and some are normative changes. It's just a wide range of different changes that we've been discussing for our ballot resolution items. And jumping on to the next meeting, so where we're at today, we're going to talk about the block vote 5 and the block vote 6. And we're hoping to wrap up all the ballot reconciliation stuff at the next meeting on the 14th. And hopefully finish this stuff out and go through the results there. And hopefully at this stage, we would have finished the ballot reconciliation. Well, at least that's the plan. Cool. So I'll discuss where we're at with because we had some block votes out. And I'll talk through the block votes. So block vote 5 consisted of substantive changes to search parameter support in AU Core. Voting closed on the 25th of October. This vote passed 16 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstain. There was a mixture of resolutions. Actually, I might just load this up if I can. These are the items. So it was a mixture of resolutions, persuasive modification, and non-persuasive. This block vote passed for these items, and this will make its way into the IG. And for block vote 6, these items were related to sex and gender concepts in AU Core. Voting also closed on the 25th of October, and this vote passed 14 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstain. There was a mixture of persuasive, non-persuasive, or persuasive modification for this one. There was also one item referred to telecom, which I'm hoping to discuss. That's probably the very next thing we'll discuss. To remove text describing pronouns as a preference in AU Core patient profile. And this item was removed from the block vote to discuss in this meeting. So what we might do then is we might navigate to wherever that item is. Probably lost my navigation structure here. I think this is Yeah, this is the one.
No, that's 47177. That one.
Yep, no, you're correct. Sorry. This
is the one.
This is the one. Awesome. Great. I think I saw David on the participant.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Sorry, I lost my screen when I loaded something else up. Awesome. So this ticket, oh, I lost it. So this ticket was removed. We just discussed that. It was removed from block vote 6. Prior to removal, it was 3 affirmative, 0 negative, and 0 abstain. I think this was from the ticket when you load it up, this was the original resolution description. This text here, David left a comment to refer to telecom and gave some suggested text here. And this was his comment around the ambiguity of the original disposition description. So if you're David, is it okay if you talk to this item?
Sure. I actually think it's the other way around. I think prior to I think it said where pronouns are provided, but oh no, okay. Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, where pronouns are provided, but any do not correspond. I'm not trying to change the intention of what this is about. I just thought that English was just need to be tightened up a little bit. So where a pronoun is provided but does not correspond to one of the Australian pronouns terms. The Australian pronouns terms are groups of pronouns. What I've suggested is it's just a bit clearer if we say where pronouns are provided, but any do not correspond to one of the Australian pronouns terms, then a text only or alternative specific coded value or values can be supplied for those pronouns. So I just thought the language was a little bit loose and needed to be tightened up.
Right. So yeah, this sort of comes from Australian pronouns being both the name of a value set as well as a description of a set of terms. So if you were to write this, you'd want to say one of the Australian pronoun terms, but the other one would be to say one of the terms in the Australian pronouns set.
Yeah, it's, you know, I'm happy to be shouted down if anyone wants to do that. But, yeah, I just thought it was also complicated because I saw different versions of this in different IGs or different places. Like one place I read referred to pronouns, another one referred to individual pronouns. All in different parts of the fire specification.
If you look at the actual content of that, follow that link, and it just gets even murkier.
But the 47176 link?
So you follow 4176.
Yeah.
And then you follow it to the sorry, you go to the text in the IG, and then you follow, and then you go down a bit further, and then the bottom, it was the bottom line there. It says where a preferred pronoun is provided, follow Australian pronouns.
Yeah, and then you go to that value set.
It's got a really strange set of pronouns, so I think this makes the whole sentence very dark and murky.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, I looked at this value set and I thought, oh dear, what have I got myself into? Because, yes.
I must admit, I agree that it would be nice to have a clearer sentence, but I don't know where to start.
Ruben, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, look, I love the fact that everyone's discussing my bad comment. I want to point out that the substance of my comment was removal of the adjective or qualifier preferred, and addressing that was, I guess, really the substance of this, which I think the proposed disposition does. David, whilst I think you're onto something in relation to improving the language, I think you're probably tagging on a thread which is probably part of a broader issue and may deserve its own tracker item to be properly dealt with. So I'm kind of wondering if you'd like to do that for the next version of AU Core, perhaps.
Yeah, and what? Let this one just go through as it is for
Yeah,
now?
I mean, sorry, the other thing I didn't mention was we've dealt with a very similar ballot comment in AU base, also from me. It's basically the same comment, and it's been resolved there. If I'm right, Brett or Ducey, you can correct me. And I think the disposition here is the same. So I'm keen that we keep the uniformity between the two for these next versions of the IGs. And absolutely, if you still believe that language could be tidied up for the next ballot, then by all means, please add a ballot comment about that. Brett, can you comment on whether we disposed of a similar item for AU base?
I do not recall is the answer.
It might be linked, Landon, if you actually go to this tracker item. I know they linked all of mine that were quite similar.
I'll have a look now, Ruben.
There we go. It's 4717. Sorry, 47157. Yeah, that relates to one. Yeah.
We disposed of that.
And that one has been resolved, has it?
Oh yeah, block vote. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So I think yeah, we could probably deal with the broader issue of clearer language separately. The substance of this item is removing the problematic word preferred.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, in that case, let's.
Can I ask a quick question? So is it the pattern also, right? It's like, here's a list of values. If you don't have something in the list of values, we'll recognize another value in another list, or we're going to let you put in whatever you want in a text field. Is that a standard pattern that we're going to see going over and over again?
For elements that are codable concept and have bindings that are less restrictive than required, then yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
I think too. It's the plural language of the pronouns, right? So I think we were kind of referring, because when we read this earlier, it was like we thought there was one instance of a pronoun that we're talking about, and we kind of go, oh yeah, that's a repeating cardinality in terms of being able to have multiple pronouns defined. But we usually just use singular for each instance, the language. But I get your point now that in fact there's multiple pronouns in the code itself. It's
in the value set. So
in the value set.
So that's why I was saying where pronouns are provided, but any one of them does not correspond, or any do not correspond, or any one or more do not correspond to one of the Australian pronouns terms, then the text only alternative. So that's all. I was just trying to clarify what the intention was originally, have in mind to what the value set contains.
I mean, I see it as you're asking them to present the value set, almost like a drop down. Pick from one of these, and then you can always have an option called other. And if they go other, they can write whatever they like. And if they write him, or they write him, then that doesn't equal. That does not equal the other one, which was him. I can't remember the whole. It's he.
Yeah.
That like you're either picking your code or you're not. And if you write something that kind of looks like one of the other codes, it is not one of the other codes. It is something else. Even if you wrote exactly the code, that'd be pretty silly. It would technically still not be that code because you didn't pick it.
Yeah. True. But what this is essentially trying to do is say that you don't have to pick something from that list. You can put in what you like, and it's valid. Does anybody agree with that, or?
Partially. I believe the binding there is extensible. So strictly speaking, what that means is that if any of those values in the value set are appropriate semantically, then you must include it. If they're not, then you can add a different code, or you can just add free text.
But we can't have software trying to conclude whether what they wrote is semantic.
You're right, Angus. You can't easily test that, and it's a known issue until AI improves. You can't easily test that right now. So it's
in a sense,
we expect people to do their best. Yeah.
In a sense, this is restating the standard extensible binding text, which we have inside the short for individual pronouns. Why are we calling out this extensible binding this way? I guess maybe we want some guidance here because people need extra guidance on it. Perhaps if we get closer to the standard extensible binding text, I've plonked the individual pronoun short into the chat, and perhaps that's closer.
Simply because the codes appear to have multiple codes in them, don't they? So we're all like,
yes, you're allowed to have multiple pronouns, and each of those pronouns is allowed to have multiple codings.
Yeah, I think there's the value set itself is worth discussing because it's effectively a multi-axial code, right? So, and I think that may be really difficult to digest if you have a subset of those in play, because it's also because we've gone through a bit of an episode in AU base with a particular coding system where we've got existing extensible terms and we wanted to put a more specific term in, but we can't actually put a more specific term in because the extensible code that's bound in the resource itself is not allowing us to do that because there's a code that is actually covering the thing that we're talking about. And that's almost this discussion, like whether if you just want to say him but not all the other parts, I don't think that's actually valid.
Yeah, you'd have to say he, him, male, blah blah blah, as well as a different code system's code for him.
Yep, do it more
surprised,
specific.
Ruben, it's not split out. Like what?
Yeah,
I assume that individuals would like to pick him, but not the rest of the set. Like now I have to pick the whole set.
Yep. So
I'm surprised that they are concatenated.
I raised this issue in the Gender Harmony project itself, which had experts and people with lived experience around all of this. And it was a discussion in the Gender Harmony project, and it really came down to trying to strike a balance between ease of use and ease of implementation in user interfaces versus being super fine-grained. Because I was also of the view that, you could separate each of those terms like he, him, and his into individual pronouns, and you just make it a multi-valued element, and then you've got real fine-grained stuff. But if you think about it, that's going to make UIs that allow people to have to select these things very difficult. And because we are trying to introduce the capture of pronouns in the first place, and there are parts of the community of implementers that don't see the point of it, unfortunately, they decided to go on the side of ease of use and implementation. And that's why it is the way it is right now.
I had a haircut yesterday and Facebook listed them all off. 1, 2,
Did
3.
they?
Yeah. But
Good for
they're
them.
not the gold standard.
Yeah.
I think we're stuck. We have to use the value set, right? It's kind of like not our problem. It's like the problem's being handed down to us, and we have.
Well, I mean, you have to use it, but you can add other codes. I mean, it's not like it's a required binding.
But if you look at the value set, it looks superficially complex, and I initially looked at it, I thought it was complex. So we've got the first one there is he, him, his, himself. In a sense, they're just the grammatical variations on a single pronoun.
Yes.
And so, in a sense, that is just one pronoun as a set of grammatical. Well, it's a set of grammatical variants on the one pronoun. It's not actually a set of alternate pronouns. It's a set of grammatical variants on the pronoun. And so in a sense, that makes it a fairly simple set. And there's probably going to be a small number of people who would choose he for that part of the grammar, but not him for another part of the grammar. It might get a little more interesting when you get down to the they, them, there. You might find someone who is happy to be they and them when that's the part of the grammar, but not happy to be theirs at that grammatical place. They might choose something else, but that's going to be edge case. So in a sense, we've only got three. In one sense, we've got three pronouns, but what we've got is the grammatical variance of them.
Yeah, well, we have, but isn't this about edge cases? I mean,
there are edge cases and more edge cases. You may find that one person in, let's pick a number, 500 wants to have the they, them, there, but it may be if it's one person in 100,000 who wants to have a different combination of those, then that winds up being a different level of needs a different level of support, as it got a different cost benefit analysis. And they go into the uncoded terms. They go into the text terms.
Yeah. So I think what was put in the chat before by, let me see, it's scrolled off my screen. What Richard put in, pronouns shall be a member of the Australian pronouns value set if any codes within that value set can apply, is spot on. But this is going on to what you would do if one of those doesn't apply.
Ruben,
any thoughts on that?
Yeah, my comment was I suspect that we are going well beyond the scope of this ballot comment. This is all great discussion and certainly happy to consider it as part of a different tracker item. But as I said, the substance of this was to remove the potentially offensive word preferred. And I think the proposed resolution does that well enough, not to say that it couldn't be improved, but if there's room for improvement, that's the subject of a different ballot comment.
Okay, so what's the best thing? Should I just withdraw this?
Well,
for now and
we can do that, or
else?
we can make a motion to accept the previously stated disposition, which was in the block vote, and go with that for now. And we can add a comment in the tracker item to say that, you know, if this group feels that this language could be improved in a future version of AU Core, then a tracker item or ballot comment for that will be created for that purpose. Would that be okay with you, David?
Yes, that would be okay. Yeah,
right.
I don't think we should waste any more time on it.
Okay.
Look at that one.
Yeah, well, no,
that
it's
just came in
definitely
the
not a
chat.
waste of time. I'm loving this discussion, but I think Landon probably has other agenda topics. So I'm going to move that we accept the original disposition, which is the same as the one in AU base.
Thank you, Ruben. Do we have someone to second that?
I'll second that one.
Right. Thank you very much. That was David, is that correct?
Correct. Another David.
Perfect. Right. Could I please ask Brett if you can pop up a vote, please? Awesome. Thanks a lot, everyone. The votes are trickling in.
I must admit that my data modeling brain is recognizing pronoun sets. There's going to be standard pronoun sets, and then people are going to want to create their own pronoun sets. And so whether it's a standard pronoun set or a personalized pronoun set or an organizational pronoun set, so it's just, it can probably escalate quite quickly.
I just looked at the Facebook ones. They have a long list and they say choose up to 4 and it's optional.
Yeah, that's it. And those lists that are in the value set have more than that. So yeah, I can see lots and lots of cases where people are going to have to depart from the value set.
Because that even looks like different languages. That looks like different languages.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I don't know. I don't think they are. I've heard of. I don't understand them all, but I've heard some of these in my English language.
I think the votes have stopped trickling in, so I will end the poll. Brett, did you have a vote?
Well, I'm a +1 as well, thanks.
Thank you. That means we have 18 affirmative, 0 negative, and 7 abstain. The motion has passed. Great. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. I think we only have 8 minutes left. I'm not sure. We did have one revisit item. Dushy, do you reckon we have enough time for this, or should this be a carryover?
We can try.
Try.
Yeah, because I think the first motion needs to be whether we do revisit it at all. So
Yes, okay. So this one here is to potentially revisit an existing position. So revisiting generally should be avoided. However, there are situations where it's necessary to reopen. So to basically revisit this, we need a formal motion to revisit, someone to second it, and with 2/3 majority vote, then we can actually go forth and make a decision on the actual ballot item itself. As long as we meet quorum rules. So the original decision was voted on in ballot 0.3.0 on this date. And it was basically the same thing to put a must support on do not perform. And I think this passed inside of a block vote. And I think the main reason, well, the original disposition description was this use case is not relevant to ordering and prescribing use cases of this resource. In this ballot, there was another must support obligation. I might open this ticket. And the rationale was that it's a modifier element and it's extremely important and has a clinical safety implication. What I might do is hand over to, is there someone actually, I think, Dushy, was it someone from the agency who asked for this to be revisited?
I think Stephen Chu asked for it to
Stephen
be
Chu,
revisited. I'm not really sure if he's in the meeting at the moment.
Okay. Do we have anyone from the agency that's willing to talk to this item?
I'm from the agency, but I'm not aware of the ins and outs, so I couldn't reasonably talk to it.
No worries. Thank you, Richard. Perhaps then, Dushy, we might hold over this ticket and try to tag someone that would like to speak to this rationale for the next technical design group meeting.
Yes, I'll contact Stephen again and.
Yeah. Could
I was going to say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to raise a comment, go on, Ruben.
Well, I just wanted to flag that this ballot comment doesn't actually have in-person flagged, so we could actually deal with it without the reporter present. If we so wanted to. I'm just very wary of the fact that we are running out of time to resolve everything for IU Core.
Yes, that is true. Thank you, Ruben. Does anyone have any comments on this item then? Does anyone want to speak to it?
Just I think this is coming now, people that don't know what modifier elements are. Basically a modifier element in a fire resource is indicating that that element must be considered when receiving and using that information. So there are some elements marked as modifier with this modifier flag. So the idea is that somebody receiving it, if they don't understand or don't want to, don't consider that element, they still need to decide if they're going to accept it. So whilst we don't have any explicit must support or obligations against this element, people systems receiving it need to still consider it. So it's kind of a bit of a requirement that's built into the fire spec. So I think part of this is trying to make that explicit in the AU core spec, which I think has some merit, but then again, there's a bunch of other things as well in the fire spec that you need to do that we don't talk about. So yeah, I think that's where this is coming from. That was just some context.
Okay.
So Brett is go on, Richard.
So what sorts of checking should we, what sorts of systems should we have to check that systems actually pay attention to the modifier elements the way they're supposed to? I'm just wondering whether we've got a gap in the way systems are evaluated and the way people think about what they need to do. I'm loath to say that we need to say in each of our specifications, and remember to look at your obligation on modifier elements, but I suspect you're right that a lot of people aren't aware of the obligations around modifier elements.
Yeah, but like this is not an isolated thing either. So it's this is one that's been plucked out. But in reality, there are other modifier elements throughout the fire spec that
there's lots
fall in the same category. Yeah. So I think it's definitely worth considering, but I think it's more of a policy question on how we do our profiling as well, whether when you're introducing profiles, particularly AU Core is probably where it's going to fall out the most, is do we need to look at every modifier element and go and actually have some obligations on it? I know IPS has got obligations, even though I think they have an obligation on this element, even though they don't have a must support on it, I think is the current situation. So having said that as well, we have our requesters only have no error as an obligation, which is not really saying you're going to process any of their content that you're getting anyway. So it's kind of, we're kind of in this place at the moment where I'm not sure we want to say anything about it.
It sounds like this is it sounds like this should not be treated by a specific solution to this particular element, that the issue should be treated by an approach to must support elements in general. So the issue could be said, nice point, but it doesn't just apply to this element. We should treat it as part of a bigger issue, and then while we treat that as the way we process this particular issue.
Yeah.
So, agreed. Does this then sort of fall under consider for future use, and then that profile thing can be investigated as a part of that revisiting?
Yeah, if you really want to opt out, you could forward it to the fire work group and say, what should we do in Australia with this problem in general?
But the thing is, it winds up being a general problem. It's the problem of ensuring system behavior pays attention to must support elements.
Yeah, I think like
sorry,
in the fire spec.
Not must support elements, modifier elements.
Yeah. I think the fire spec lays out some kind of expectation, which is the link I sent through with just definition of what is modifier means, and which is that how those elements are marked.
Okay, I think
it goes into like how you should behave as well, and everything as well as a system.
So I think we're at time, so we might hold this issue, if that's okay, Dushi, over to the next sectoral zone group meeting. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Oh, I've lost my slides again. So I'll just quickly close out. I think that is just the future meeting schedule. And next week will actually, I think Dushi will be, or someone we'll be sending out the block votes 7 and 8 directly after this meeting, and we'll review those at this point and carry over that item. But given time constraints, I just want to thank everyone for their contributions today. And we'll close this meeting out. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks for chairing.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye
Landon.
all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.